Beneath the marbled magnificence of St. Peter's Basilica lies a silence deeper than any cathedral hymn. Encased in layers of stone, steel, and secrecy is a subterranean labyrinth stretching over 50 miles home to one of the most enigmatic collections of human knowledge ever assembled. This is the Vatican Apostolic Archive, once more ominously known as the Vatican Secret Archive. But the term secret wasn't a misnomer, it was a warning. Imagine a single key, not made of iron or gold, but of silence forged in centuries of denial, locked behind the most powerful doors on earth. What if that key opened not just a vault, from ancient technologies to erased saints, from forbidden prophecies to whispers of non-human contact? The truth is not lost. It's hidden, and tonight, we go looking for it. Welcome to the Forbidden's Vatican Vault. This is Dust Files. Every like, every subscribe, every share helps us keep digging. Dust Files isn't just a channel. It's a record of everything they told you not to ask. So join us, because the next secret might be the one that changes everything. To understand the vault, we must rewind the clock, not to the 1600s when Pope Paul V gave the archive its modern structure, but to the 4th century CE, when Christianity, once persecuted in shadows, rose to dominate empires. Constantine the Great's conversion wasn't just spiritual, it was geopolitical. The Church, suddenly bathed in imperial favor, began a relentless campaign to consolidate not only power, but knowledge. Pagan temples fell silent. Ancient texts vanished. Oral traditions once spoken around fires were extinguished by ecclesiastical decree. But what was lost, and more chillingly, what was taken? Whispers persist of ancient scrolls seized during the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, where church fathers determined not only theological doctrine, but what could be remembered and what must be forgotten. Gospels that spoke of other messiahs. Books that suggested Jesus lived not as a singular divine being, but as one of many enlightened teachers. Documents that chronicled miracles, now deemed heretical. These were not destroyed, but hidden. The burning of the Library of Alexandria is often seen as history's greatest intellectual tragedy. But few know that early Christian zeal may have played a role. Some scholars argue that it was not the flames of Julius Caesar or invading Muslims that turned the scrolls to ash, but the quiet decree of bishops determined to erase incompatible truths. Yet not all was lost to fire. Some say fragments were salvaged and smuggled to Rome. As the Church's grip tightened across continents, so did its appetite for secrecy. During the Inquisition, texts on alchemy, astronomy, and esoteric philosophy were banned, not because they were false, but because they were powerful. Knowledge that gave man agency, that hinted at creation without creator, became a threat. The vault grew. In the 15th century, Johannes Gutenberg's printing press threatened to append centuries of curated ignorance. Books could now reach the hands of commoners. But the Church adapted. It did not just ban books, it collected them. Heretical texts were seized not to be destroyed, but to be hidden, studied, and kept away from public eyes. The vault became less a graveyard, more a cage. What's inside? According to insiders, everything from Galileo's trial transcripts, complete with annotations in his trembling hand, to correspondence with secret societies, even grimoires detailing rituals long erased from Catholic liturgy. Rumors swirl of letters exchanged with Abraham Lincoln and Adolf Hitler, maps from the lost Library of Pergamon, even documentation of exorcisms deemed too violent for faith to reconcile. The renaming of the Secret Archive to the Apostolic Archive in 2019 was not a shift in transparency, but in optics. For centuries, the Vatican has maintained that only researchers with qualified credentials may enter, and even then, only select documents are made available. Over 85 kilometers of shelving remain untouched by public scrutiny. This isn't merely historical hoarding, it's curation of reality itself. If you control the story, you control the soul. And the Vatican has told a single story for millennia, one gospel, one truth, one God. The vault ensures it stays that way. But every lock invites a key. Every sealed door awakens curiosity. And now, in a world where secrets unravel with a single leak, where whistleblowers and satellites pierce borders and stone, there are few things more dangerous than a book. Bound pages, quiet ink. These have the power to dismantle empires, unseat gods, and ignite revolutions. The Catholic Church understood this. For nearly 4 centuries, it kept an official blacklist known as the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the Index of Forbidden Books. It was not a metaphor. It was a literal catalog. First published in 1559 under the direction of Pope Paul IV, the index named hundreds, then thousands of titles that were deemed corrosive to the faith. These books could not be printed, sold, or read by any faithful Catholic. The offense? They dared to ask questions. Some were works of science. Nicolaus Copernicus's On the Revolutions of the Celestial Spheres, which proposed that the Earth was not the center of the universe, was swiftly silenced. The idea that our world might be just another planet among many wasn't simply astronomical heresy. It was a theological insurrection. Then came Galileo. His support for heliocentrism, his telescope-verified truths, were too vivid to ignore. The Church silenced him not just with ink, but with confinement, house arrest for the remainder of his life. His book, Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems, was banned and buried under the Index. But Galileo wasn't alone in that tomb of ideas. Giordano Bruno, a Dominican friar turned philosopher, went further. He believed in an infinite universe, in other worlds, in reincarnation, in a cosmos too vast for church dogma to contain. The Inquisition made an example of him in 1600. He was burned alive in Rome's Campo di Fiori. His writings, unsurprisingly, were condemned to the Index, but not all of them were destroyed. Some believe certain manuscripts, annotated with symbols resembling Hermetic and Rosicrucian origin, were quietly taken underground into the Vatican's vaults. The Index was not a static document. It evolved with fear. Every pope added names: Descartes, Pascal, Rousseau, Kant, even novels like Defoe's Robinson Crusoe and Milton's Paradise Lost appeared briefly, not for blasphemy, but for suggesting autonomy, reason, and doubt. These weren't merely books. They were bombs beneath the Church's foundation. By the 18th century, the Enlightenment had erupted across Europe, and with it came waves of writing that challenged divine authority. The Index swelled. Philosophers like Voltaire and Diderot ridiculed organized religion with reasons so sharp it bled doctrine. The Church responded the only way it knew how, by trying to erase them. But there was a problem. These ideas had already escaped the monastery walls. Still, some texts disappeared entirely, not into public libraries, not into flames, but into silence. There are unconfirmed reports from former Vatican archivists, their names always withheld, their testimonies whispered posthumously, describing a special wing in the vault reserved for the irrecoverables. Manuscripts so dangerous, so dissonant with the Church's narrative, that they could not be destroyed, but could never be seen again. Among these rumors is the elusive Book of the Black Sun, allegedly a 16th century Rosicrucian manuscript that merges mysticism, astronomy, and anti-Trinitarian theology. No copies survive in any known collection, yet references to it appear in letters exchanged between suppressed Protestant sects and dissident Jesuits. One letter, preserved in a private German archive, claims the original was confiscated during a secret papal raid in Prague and delivered unto the Librum Infernus, a name believed to refer to a sealed section beneath the apostolic archive. There are stories, unproven but persistent, of clergy punished not for writing these books, but merely for reading them. A Jesuit priest in 1738, Father Matteo Cirillo, was allegedly excommunicated and vanished after being caught transcribing alchemical verses from a banned Hermetic text. His notes were never recovered. Some claim he was imprisoned in the Castel Sant'Angelo. Others say he died of madness after seeing what man should not read. Even well into the 20th century, the index continued to grow. Simone de Beauvoir, Jean-Paul Sartre, modern existentialists, feminists, even psychoanalysts. Their works were added not for overt heresy, but for shaking the idea that man was made solely in the image of God. In 1966, the index was officially abolished by Pope Paul VI. The Church declared it was no longer a legal instrument of censorship, but abolition is not erasure. The books may now circulate freely, but their shadows remain. And the vault, the true vault, has not been opened. There is a lingering question. Why keep them? Why preserve that which you fear? Some say it is to understand the enemy. Others believe the Church has always walked a delicate line, one foot in revelation, the other in preservation. To destroy these books would be to eliminate proof that they existed. To lock them away is to control the myth, to possess the dangerous beauty of forbidden knowledge without letting it breathe. And then there's a more chilling possibility, that among these books lie truths the Church itself cannot fully disprove. Texts that hint at pre-Christian cosmologies, accounts of miracles from other faiths, scientific predictions that align too precisely with suppressed visions. The kind of knowledge that doesn't just challenge the Church, it challenges history, time, and the very idea of divine authority. In the end, the index was never just a list. It was a mirror, reflecting what power fears, what dogma cannot contain, and what humanity is always tempted to seek. In the deserts of Egypt in 1945, a farmer digging for fertilizer uncovered something that would rattle the foundations of Christian history: a sealed jar containing 13 leather-bound papyrus codices. What he had found were texts never meant to survive. These were the so-called Gnostic Gospels, long suppressed, hidden, or destroyed. Among them was the Gospel of Thomas, an account that speaks not of Christ's miracles, but of his sayings, stripped of divine spectacle. In this version, salvation doesn't come through belief, but from within. This was not an isolated discovery. From the caves of Qumran near the Dead Sea came another revelation: scrolls containing early Jewish sectarian writings, some older than the canonical Bible itself. Among them, fragments hinting at a Messiah, not of divine birth, but of prophetic bloodline, a teacher of righteousness, not necessarily the Son of God. These discoveries whispered a dangerous question. What if the Bible we know today is only one version of a more complex, fragmented past? But what happened to the text that didn't survive? What of those that never saw the light of day? Scholars and former clergy have long alleged that the Vatican possesses even earlier Christian manuscripts, some in Aramaic, Coptic, and Syriac, that predate the canonized Gospels. Leaked documents, smuggled testimonies, and even dying confessions hint at a chilling pattern. Texts that reframe the roles of key biblical figures, including Mary Magdalene, not as a redeemed sinner, but as a leader, a teacher, perhaps more. The Gospel of Mary, long dismissed as Gnostic heresy, describes a disciple who understood Christ's teachings better than the apostles. Why was she cast aside in the canonical telling? In the Vatican's deepest vaults, rumor claims that there exist versions of this gospel, untranslated, uncirculated, locked in dark drawers, that expand upon her relationship with Jesus, hinting at an uncomfortable truth: a feminine dimension to divine authority the Church was never ready to accept. Even more controversial is the Gospel of Judas. Found in a Coptic manuscript and authenticated by National Geographic in the early 2000s, it portrays Judas not as a traitor, but as the one disciple who understood Jesus best chosen to fulfill a secret divine instruction. This interpretation doesn't diminish betrayal, it reframes it as obedience to a deeper will. Such revelations fracture the neat narrative constructed over centuries. If these alternative gospels are true, or even partially authentic, they suggest that early Christianity was not a unified movement, but a contested battleground of ideologies. The Jesus of Thomas speaks in riddles and parables about unlocking divine understanding. The Jesus of Judas speaks in metaphysical codes. The Jesus of canonical scripture performs miracles, dies for sins, and rises in divine glory. 3 portraits, 1 man. But which one was the real Christ? The early church fathers knew of these texts. Many were debated, even referenced in early Christian councils. Yet over time, a pattern of exclusion formed. Under Emperor Constantine's rule and during the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, the foundational creed of Christianity was constructed, not necessarily discovered. Books were chosen. Others were discarded. Why? Was it theological purity, political necessity, or something far more, deliberate and erasure? The Vatican's role in this selective history is both explicit and opaque. In the 17th century, Pope Paul V formalized the Vatican Apostolic Archive, then called the Secret Archive. It wasn't a conspiracy. The term secretum meant private, but its access was restricted to a select elite. And among its contents, scholars believe, lie translations and fragments of apocryphal texts never released to the public. Some suspect they were acquired from ancient libraries before they were looted. Others suggest they were quietly purchased from collectors before being withdrawn from the academic circuit. A 1970s testimony from a former Jesuit librarian, later dismissed as a hoax by church officials, claimed to have seen a codex titled The Testimony of the 12, a document that allegedly contained conflicting accounts of Jesus' resurrection. Another unnamed source described scrolls written in an unknown Semitic dialect, labeled as non-doctrinal and unstable, stored in sealed cedar boxes, and only accessible with papal approval. One of the most persistent legends involves a Vatican chamber known only by its code, Scala 17, said to require biometric verification and authorization from the Apostolic Signatura, judicial authority in the Catholic Church. This room reportedly houses materials deemed theologically disruptive. Among them, handwritten Greek papyri cataloged not by title, but by risk classification. Of course, no one can verify this. The Church remains silent, officially denying the existence of any material that contradicts its teachings. The Vatican Press Office maintains that all legitimate theological documents have been thoroughly studied and, where necessary, publicly debated. And yet, access to the archive remains so limited that even credentialed scholars must wait years, sometimes decades, to review a single manuscript. What are they protecting? Is it faith, unity, or the fear that revelation could unravel the entire doctrinal fabric? History tells us that information is power. The Church, perhaps more than any other institution, understood this. The suppression of texts was not merely censorship. It was an act of narrative control. In a world where the divine intersects with empire, where miracles touch politics, and where salvation meets secrecy, truth becomes a dangerous possession. The story of Christ, as the world knows it, may be less a singular truth and more a curated tale. One version among many, selected not by the apostles, but by the architects of the empire. And somewhere, in the marble silence beneath Vatican City, the missing pages still wait. Their words are old, their meanings perhaps revolutionary. But for now, they remain unread, unspoken, unforgiven. In cathedrals bathed in candlelight and incense, where Latin prayers echo beneath vaulted ceilings, the image of the Vatican is one of solemnity, sanctity, and unwavering resistance to all that smells of heresy. Publicly, the Church has denounced witchcraft, condemned sorcery, and branded the occult as a path to damnation. Yet in the shadows of history, behind layers of smoke and silence, another version lingers. Whispers of a church not only aware of the occult, but deeply entangled in its study. This is not mere speculation born of fiction. In 1484, Pope Innocent VIII issued the bull Summus Desiderantis Effectibus, officially sanctioning the Inquisition to hunt down witches across Europe. It was this papal decree that gave rise to the infamous Malleus Maleficarum, a manual for identifying, prosecuting, and executing supposed practitioners of black magic. But the authors of this text, Dominican Inquisitors Heinrich Kramer and Jacob Sprenger, did more than condemn witchcraft. They documented it. Rituals, symbols, spells, the very things the Church claimed were blasphemous, were meticulously cataloged, translated, and studied. The question is, why? Were they simply compiling evidence? Or preserving knowledge? In Rome, locked behind the fortified walls of the Vatican Apostolic Archive, lie hundreds of medieval grimoires, ancient magical texts, once confiscated from accused heretics. Among them are rumored to be Latin translations of Babylonian incantation tablets, alchemical diagrams from Moorish Spain, and Kabbalistic manuscripts written in the numeric language of angels. Scholars granted rare access have hinted at references to the Ars Notoria, an esoteric work said to grant divine memory and instant learning through prayerful ritual. Others described the enigmatic Tea of Solomon, a grimoire that allegedly originated in the hands of a Judean king and was passed down through secret clerical orders. Even the architecture of the Vatican reflects this duality. The floor of St. Peter's Basilica contains cryptic symbols not found in Christian doctrine. The bronze sphere Sphera con Sphera in the Vatican courtyard echoes the Hermetic principle as above, so below, an axiom central to both Gnostic mysticism and occult philosophy. In Raphael's School of Athens, displayed within the Vatican museums, the inclusion of Plato, holding the Timaeus, a cosmological text beloved by both early Christians and Neoplatonic mystics, suggests a lingering reverence for esoteric thought. More than art, more than metaphor. By the 17th century, the Vatican's fascination with alchemy became increasingly difficult to deny. Pope John XXII, in the early 1300s, had condemned alchemists as frauds. Yet by the time of Pope Sixtus IV, rumors swirled that certain clerics were experimenting with transmutation under papal patronage. A letter dated 1610 from the French alchemist Nicolas Barnot describes a visit to Rome, claiming he was invited to a private sanctum beneath Castel Sant'Angelo, where monks conducted surgical experiments in secrecy. Then there's the case of Athanasius Kircher, a Jesuit priest, linguist, and scholar of the 1600s. He is often described as the Vatican's Renaissance man, but Kircher's writings go far beyond theology. He studied Egyptian hieroglyphs, divination, magnetism, and music theory, blending mysticism and science in ways that unsettled his peers. His personal library, once housed at the Roman College, contained forbidden tomes, later sealed by papal decree. Kircher believed that ancient civilizations encoded sacred knowledge within symbols, and that through the proper cipher, linguistic or mystical one, could access divine power. Power the Vatican both feared and preserved. Fast forward to the 20th century, and a more chilling layer emerges: demonology. The Church publicly disavows magic, but actively trains exorcists. Each diocese is required to appoint at least one priest who has studied the so-called ritual Romanum, the official rite of exorcism. But beneath this ritual lies a darker tradition: the study of demon names, hierarchies, and behaviors compiled not from Scripture, but from ancient occult sources. The Pseudomonarchia Daemonum, a 16th century demonological catalog by Johann Weyer, was once considered heretical. Today, parts of it are rumored to be referenced in private Vatican training documents. Modern-day exorcists have described possession cases that involve non-canonical entities, suggesting an internal list of demons never disclosed to the public. There are even rumors of the Librum Obscura, a book so dangerous that only the Pope and the head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith may view it. said to contain rituals drawn from Babylonian, Ethiopian, and early Gnostic sources. The text is allegedly used not to perform magic, but to recognize it when encountered. This notion that one must know evil to defeat it has long justified the Church's shadowy scholarship. But has the line between knowledge and participation ever blurred? In 1999, a Vatican archivist anonymously claimed that certain orders within the Church maintained contact with esoteric societies, Rosicrucians, Martinists, and even remnants of the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor. While no evidence supports this directly, history records moments of strange alignment. For instance, in 1888, Cardinal Mariano Rampolla, Secretary of State under Pope Leo XIII, was nominated for the papacy. His election was blocked by the Austro-Hungarian Empire on the grounds that he had ties to secret societies. Rampolla's library reportedly contained alchemical texts, and he was known to correspond with occult scholars. Even Pope Pius XII, often remembered for his stern orthodoxy during World War II, maintained private sessions with German theologians and scholars, archaeo-symbolic, lore those who studied the intersection of Christian symbols and pre-Christian myth. Some say he feared a growing surge of spiritual fascism, a movement blending esoteric ideology and authoritarianism. He believed, according to Vatican journals, that the old demons return cloaked in modern flesh. The Vatican's role, then, is not simply to condemn darkness. It may also be to understand it, comprehend it enough to counter it, contain it, or perhaps quietly wield it. The duality is ancient. In the Bible itself, King Solomon, builder of the temple and a father of wisdom, was said to control demons with a ring. Moses, raised in Egyptian courts, wielded power against Pharaoh's magicians, using signs not dissimilar to their own. Even Christ's desert confrontation with Satan is a ritual echo, a confrontation with forces beyond comprehension. Yet the Church today speaks in binaries, good versus evil, light versus dark. It does not acknowledge the murky truths hidden in its archives, the strange symbols on its walls, or the rituals it performs in shadows. To acknowledge those things would be to admit that beneath its robes of sanctity lies a spine of secrets. Perhaps the most guarded truth of all is this, that the Church, like its ancient predecessors, does not merely fear the occult. It studies it, catalogs it, keeps it close, and maybe, in rooms where incense thickens and prayers grow cold, it listens to it. For if there is power in words, and there is, then the Church knows that some words must be kept silent, some truths must remain unwritten, and some alliances must be denied, even as they are sealed in the dark. There are few forces more potent than prophecy. It bends time around belief, sends tremors through empires, and turns mere rumors into doctrine. But what happens when prophecy threatens the very institution it arrives to guide? In 1917, 3 shepherd children in the Portuguese town of Fatima claimed to have witnessed a radiant woman, brighter than the sun, delivering a series of visions. The event soon became known as the Miracle of the Sun, witnessed, some say, by over 70,000 people. Amid dancing solar phenomena and mass hysteria, the lady gave the children 3 secrets. The first 2 were revealed within decades. The third was sealed in a Vatican envelope, labeled to be opened no later than 1960. But 1960 came and went. Popes changed. The world tumbled into Cold War paranoia. Still silence. It wasn't until the year 2000, under immense public pressure, that the Vatican released what it claimed was the third secret. According to the official narrative, the vision described a bishop in white, gunned down amidst ruins and corpses. The Church hastily framed it as a symbolic reference to the 1981 assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. Case closed. But many weren't convinced. Cardinal Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, himself hinted that the released version was incomplete. The late Father Malachi Martin, who read the original document under oath, stated that the true prophecy spoke of apostasy within the church itself, a spiritual collapse from the top down, he said. Other theologians claimed it detailed a future pope under the control of satanic forces, a false shepherd leading millions astray. If true, the implications were catastrophic, not just for Catholicism, but for global Christianity. And then there's the matter of the prophecy of the popes. Attributed to the 12th century Irish Archbishop, Saint Malachi, this prophecy allegedly lists 112 future popes by cryptic Latin titles, each one eerily matching elements of their papacies. The 111th, Gloria Olivae, was widely associated with Pope Benedict XVI. The final entry? Simply, Peter the Roman. According to the text, he will guide the church through many tribulations. And after his reign, the city of 7 hills will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people. The Vatican has never endorsed the prophecy's authenticity, but it has never fully denounced it either. Which brings us to the man seated on the papal throne today, Pope Francis, the first Jesuit, the first from the Americas, and curiously, not named Peter yet born Jorge Mario Bergoglio, to Italian parents, Romans by blood. The parallels are uncomfortable, even more so when paired with unearthed documents suggesting the prophecy of the popes was once kept under lock and key in the Vatican's Archivum Secretum, its deepest, most controlled vault. If false, why keep it hidden for centuries? If harmless, why not publish it? Whispers grow louder when we consider the connection between Fatima and Malachi. Some scholars claim the original third secret echoed Malachi's final vision, that it predicted schism, a pope in white robes presiding not over unity but confusion, a betrayal not by external enemies, but internal corruption. In private interviews, several bishops who viewed the unreleased secret confessed to being deeply disturbed, with one stating that if made public, it would cause worldwide panic. It is here that the shadows deepen. There are allegations unconfirmed, but persistent, that the Vatican vault houses more than just Christian prophecy. Some former insiders claim it holds Sumerian tablets, excavated during the 19th century, but never disclosed. Others speak of Mayan codices, ones that survived the Spanish destruction of native libraries, describing cycles of divine punishment, solar resets, and cosmic alignments eerily resonant with revelations. In 2010, a Vatican astronomer, Guy Consolmagno, made a curious statement during a conference. If extraterrestrial life is discovered, it would not contradict the faith. Though quickly buried in academic nuance, his words stoked an old fire that the Church has prepared for something far beyond human conflict. Whether ancient prophecy or modern fear, the Vatican has shown a clear pattern. Conceal first, clarify later. But why? One theory suggests they fear doctrinal collapse. A prophecy indicating the fall of the Church could be a self-fulfilling nightmare. Believers might abandon faith. Enemies could exploit the weakness. Panic could spiral into rebellion. Another theory is more pragmatic and more sinister. Control. By filtering prophecy, by guarding revelation, the Church decides not just how the story ends, but when it begins. The common thread in these stories, Fatima, Malachi, the hidden codices, is narrative authority. Who has the right to say what God truly meant? Who gets to interpret the signs? And who decides when humanity is ready? The Vatican's answer, time and again, is itself. And so, prophecies remain buried, sanitized for the masses, diluted through translation, filtered through centuries of calculated discretion. But even the most fortified vault cannot contain a storm forever. Eventually, something leaks. A whisper, a page, a pattern in history repeating itself. Perhaps the real secret of Fatima is not a single vision, but the Church's terror that belief itself is more volatile than any prediction. That hope, once set loose without their guidance, might reshape the very world they spent millennia trying to mold. In the end, the question isn't whether the Vatican hides prophecies. The question is, which ones they fear the most. It began with a dawn raid, October 13th, 1307, a date forever scorched into history. All across France, members of the Knights Templar, once the most powerful and wealthy military order in Christendom, were arrested, tortured, and condemned. Their Grandmaster, Jacques de Molay, would eventually be burned at the stake. Their properties were seized, their secrets buried, but not all of them. For centuries, whispers have haunted the silence left in the Templars' wake. Whispers that not everything was captured or destroyed, that what was most precious was hidden, and that some of it never left the grasp of power at all, but was carefully folded into the heart of the Vatican itself. The Templars had become too powerful, too rich, and perhaps too knowledgeable. Their fleets had vanished, their ledgers burned, and yet too many anomalies remained. Within mere weeks of the mass arrest, there were reports of Templar ships seen fleeing the western ports of France, some bound, it was said, for Scotland, others for more distant, unknown shores. The official records, meanwhile, grew eerily silent. But what exactly were they protecting? It wasn't just gold. It wasn't merely relics or artifacts. Many historians now believe the real Templar treasure was knowledge. Manuscripts, scrolls, relics with theological or geopolitical implications so profound they could shatter the foundations of the medieval world. And if anyone had the resources and motive to ensure that knowledge didn't spread, it was the Catholic Church. The Holy Grail is the most famous of the alleged Templar relics. Not a chalice, perhaps, but something stranger. Some accounts claim it was a document, others a bloodline. The 12th century writings of Wolfram von Eschenbach speak of the Grail not as a cup, but as a stone one that gave life and understanding. The Templars, he hinted, were its guardians. If so, then when the order fell, where did that sacred object go? Some believe it was handed over under duress. Others suggest it was hidden in plain sight, perhaps in cathedrals or monasteries. But one theory carries darker weight, that in the final hours, under pressure from both king and pope, the Templars agreed to a bargain. That in exchange for their silence and the lives of a few, their most powerful relics and writings were transferred into papal custody, locked away within the Vatican's most secret vaults. It would explain the sudden and uncharacteristic leniency shown to certain high-ranking Templars after the initial raids. Some were quietly pardoned. Others vanished into ecclesiastical custody. In Rome, entries from 1314 mention the receipt of several foreign reliquaries of unknown origin, deposited into a sub-collection of the Vatican Library, now sealed to all but the highest clergy. Curiously, this was also the era when mysterious new maps began appearing in Europe maps that hinted at coastlines beyond known navigation. The Piri-Reis map, drawn in 1513, but based on older sources, contains outlines of Antarctica ice-free. Some researchers claim these charts may have originated from knowledge passed down through the Templars, or obtained by them. If so, did the Vatican inherit those charts as part of the bargain? Then there are the claims obscure, unverifiable, but persistent that among the Templar cargo, seized or surrendered, are documents suggesting a different lineage for Christ, genealogies, apocryphal gospels, writings that place Jesus not as a lone figure, but as part of a broader social and possibly dynastic network married, some say, with children. The Gospel of Philip, discovered much later in Nag Hammadi, speaks cryptically of Mary Magdalene as Jesus' companion, the Greek term koinonos implying intimacy or partnership. Such documents in the wrong hands would have been heresy. In the Vatican's hands, they become silent. There's also the strange matter of the Vatican's evolving architecture after the fall of the Templars. In the early 14th century, a subterranean expansion of papal infrastructure occurred recorded, under vague references to preservation vaults and special collections. These underground chambers remain sealed today, Few have access. Fewer still speak of them. One anonymous former archivist, who leaked details in the late 1990s, claimed that among the items locked away were Templar crates marked with the seal of Jerusalem. And what of the Templar rituals themselves? Their initiations were secretive. Accusations during their trial included spitting on the cross, denial of Christ, and the worship of a mysterious head, possibly Baphomet. While these were likely exaggerations forged under torture, the truth may still lie somewhere in the middle. Were the Templars in possession of esoteric knowledge? Had they absorbed rituals from their time in the Holy Land, perhaps from Islamic or even pre-Islamic mystical traditions? If so, the Church's decision to preserve these texts rather than destroy them would make a chilling kind of sense. Better to guard dangerous knowledge than let it proliferate. Better to suppress it behind sanctified walls than risk it falling into rebellious hands. It is said that Pope Clement V, who ordered the suppression of the Templars under pressure from King Philip IV of France, later regretted the decision. Before his death, he allegedly commissioned a Book of Reconciliation, an internal record of the Templars' final testimony and the Church's confiscations. This book was never published, never seen, but its name appears once in a 15th century Vatican index, then vanishes forever. In 2007, the Vatican unexpectedly released a set of trial documents known as the Chinon Parchment, admitting for the first time that the Templars had, in fact, been absolved of heresy by the Church secretly. Why release that information then? Was it a subtle attempt to revise the past without revealing the whole truth? Or was it a warning shot? A signal that some stories will never be fully buried? The tragedy of the Templars is not just that they were betrayed, but that their knowledge was never meant for one institution alone. Their legacy was bigger than faith or dogma. It was a fusion of East and West, mysticism and science, the known and the forbiddens. When that legacy was sealed within the Vatican, humanity may have lost access to something ancient, something vital. The truth, perhaps, is not that the Templars were destroyed, but that they were consumed. Their secrets did not die in the flames. They were archived, sanitized, hidden behind a veil of divine authority where only whispers remain. And sometimes, a whisper is all it takes to start a fire. In the dry desert mountains of southeastern Arizona, under a sky of stars undisturbed by city light, sits the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope. The VATT, its existence is not hidden, and yet its purpose is rarely questioned. The answer, if there is one, lies not in the stars above, but deep beneath the marble corridors of Vatican City, where records older than the telescope itself suggest a troubling narrative, that the Church may not only suspect the existence of extraterrestrial life, it may have known all along. Centuries before Galileo's trial, and long before Copernicus whispered his heliocentric model, theologians in the Holy See quietly debated what it would mean for the cosmos to be populated, not metaphorically, not in some poetic or angelic sense, but literally. Documents from the 13th century, buried in monastic correspondence and redacted volumes, speak of inhabitants of the upper firmament and sentient creation beyond Eden. These weren't metaphors. These were theological puzzles, ones the Church dared not answer publicly. One name surfaces again and again in suppressed correspondence. Cardinal Nicolaus Cusanus, a 15th century bishop and philosopher whose writings on life in the stars shocked his contemporaries. In one hidden treatise, preserved only in fragments, he muses that there may be beings not descended from Adam, created by God in other realms, unknown to Earth. Heretical? Certainly, but also eerily prescient. For it would be nearly 500 years before scientists began speaking of exoplanets. And yet Cusanus had already laid the foundation for a church-sanctioned cosmic pluralism, carefully buried beneath centuries of silence. Some scholars believe the Vatican's obsession with the heavens began not with telescopes, but with visions. Medieval chronicles mention strange occurrences, monks recording burning wheels in the sky, cloisters disturbed by angels of light who spoke in unknown tongues. Most of these stories were dismissed as mystical hallucinations or divine metaphor, but others, notably those archived under the Codex Angelorum, describe phenomena eerily similar to modern UFO encounters: levitating spheres, metallic crafts, and sudden temporal dislocations. One account, dated to the year 1231, describes a silver dome that split the sky open above the Abbey of Fossanova, witnessed by at least 11 monks. What followed was stranger still: the sudden loss of 3 hours, missing time unaccounted for, and the inexplicable appearance of strange sigils burned into the stone chapel wall, sigils later identified in Sumerian star charts. That parchment, fragile and torn, never made it into public church history. It resides, according to those few who've seen it, in a climate-sealed shelf of the Secret Archives, inaccessible even to most cardinals. But there's a modern dimension to this cosmic secrecy, and it begins in 1891 when Pope Leo XIII formally established the Vatican Observatory. Officially, it was an attempt to show the world that the Church supports science. Unofficially, it may have been a response to something else entirely. A recovered artifact brought from Mesopotamia depicting winged beings descending from stars, annotated with geometric patterns that matched no known ancient language, and yet aligned precisely with celestial coordinates mapped in the 20th century. Whispers of this artifact reached American and British intelligence during the Cold War. According to declassified memos from Project Sigma, a joint U.S. Air Force and CIA initiative to track UFO reports, Vatican representatives were present at several early meetings between military intelligence and private aerospace contractors. In 1954, a former U.S. intelligence officer claimed the Vatican had been briefed on extraterrestrial craft retrievals, not because of theological necessity, but because they were thought to possess documents going back to Roman times describing visitors from beyond the firmament. The Jesuits appear repeatedly in these stories, not only as astronomers, but as archivists of cosmic secrets. Father Malachi Martin, a controversial former Jesuit and Vatican insider, once claimed that something was coming from the sky and that the Vatican knew it. In his final interviews before his sudden and suspicious death in 1999, Martin hinted at a hidden chapter of the Book of Revelation, a version never released to the public, which described not the return of Christ, but the return of something else. Watchers from the heavens who judge the world not by its sins, but by its survival. These statements, dismissed by skeptics as sensationalism, gain weight when one considers the Vatican's current scientific partnerships. The VATT is cooperated with the University of Arizona, an institution closely tied to NASA. In 2009, a Vatican-sponsored conference on astrobiology was quietly held, inviting scientists, theologians, and even exobiologists to discuss life beyond Earth and its theological implications. No transcript of the conference was ever publicly released. One of the most enigmatic figures at the observatory is Father Jose Gabriel Funes, former director of the Vatican Observatory. In a 2010 interview, he stunned both the faithful and the scientific community by stating, "The existence of extraterrestrials does not contradict our faith. We cannot rule out that other beings, perhaps more evolved than us, exist and were created by God." These remarks were carefully crafted, yet deeply suggestive, as though preparing the world for a revelation the Church had long concealed. But what might that revelation be? Some theorists argue that the vault beneath the Apostolic Palace contains more than lost gospels and forbidden theology. They speak of star maps older than Ptolemy, texts in Proto-Sumerian detailing visitations by beings whose ships carried thunder but cast no shadow, and even early Christian scrolls censored for containing accounts of men who came from the heavens not as angels, but as curious watchers with shining skin. One document, supposedly dated to the year 772, claims Pope Adrian I received a gift from the stars, a crystalline orb inscribed with unknown script, now hidden in the papal treasury. Why hide such things? The answer may be theological or existential. If life exists beyond Earth, questions arise that pierce the foundation of Catholic doctrine. Was Christ's sacrifice universal or Earth-specific? Do other civilizations have their own incarnation? What if those civilizations are morally superior or technologically dominant? Such questions cannot be answered from the pulpit. They demand a reimagining of divine order, one the Church has never been eager to undertake in public. And yet, behind closed doors, it appears those questions are not only asked, they may have been answered. In 2021, leaked documents from an Italian journalist claimed that Pope Francis had received a private briefing from the European Space Agency on anomalous signals detected near Alpha Centauri, signals showing patterns of intelligent modulation. The Vatican neither confirmed nor denied the meeting. But shortly afterward, a secret symposium on theological responses to contact was held at Castel Gandolfo, the Pope's summer residence. It is no longer a matter of if we are alone. The real question is, what has already been known, and why has it been kept from us? The stars were once maps of destiny and divinity. Today, they are becoming evidence. And the Vatican, that ancient gatekeeper of sacred truth, may hold the keys to a cosmic chapter in human history we were never meant to read. In the silent corridors beneath Vatican City, far from the light of day or the whispers of common knowledge, some say rests a collection of ancient technologies older than Rome, older than Babylon, older even than recorded history itself. The story begins not in a cathedral or monastery, but on windswept shores and jungle-covered ruins. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, Catholic missionaries, sanctioned explorers, and Vatican-funded scholars journeyed to the farthest corners of the earth, not merely to spread faith, but it seems, to retrieve what had been forgotten. The chronicles of these men, mostly sealed or redacted, tell of temples with metallic inscriptions no one could read, of devices that glowed in the dark without flame or wire, and of subterranean chambers beneath Andean mountains and Egyptian sands vaults that had been unopened for thousands of years. One report, archived in 1924 and referenced in restricted Jesuit circles, speaks of a discovery in the Libyan desert, a polished cube made of unknown alloy, emitting low vibrations when touched. The team that retrieved it vanished en route to Rome. Only fragments of their correspondence remain mentioning machinery of the old world and the voice beneath the silence. The box, if it reached the Vatican, was never seen again. But the references don't end there. In 1939, a Vatican emissary embedded in Tibet allegedly gained access to scrolls kept by the Bon monks' texts, describing a time before the last great flood when sky chariots ruled the skies and the light speakers walked the mountains. These scrolls, written in an undeciphered pictographic tongue, were reportedly photographed and brought back. According to one unverified catalog entry in the vault's logbooks, labeled Aditib Achi X07, a set of documents regarding interhemispheric engines and crystalline transmitters were archived under restricted viewing protocols, accessible only to the prefect of the Apostolic Library and members of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. Skeptics dismiss these accounts as myth, exaggeration, or misinterpretation, but others point to curious patterns in Vatican behavior. There is a persistent rumor, whispered among archivists and underground researchers, of a sealed section within the Vatican vault known as Domus Enoch, the House of Enoch, allegedly named after the antediluvian patriarch who walked with God and was taken into the heavens. This chamber supposedly houses materials deemed too dangerous, too destabilizing for public release. One uncorroborated claim from a defrocked archivist states that inside Domus Enoch are star maps etched on thin sheets of metal maps showing constellations as they appeared not from Earth, but from another planetary vantage. The deeper question emerges: if such knowledge exists, why conceal it? Some theologians argue the Church fears a philosophical rupture. Technology older than Scripture, civilizations with power rivaling modernity, or evidence of non-human intelligence would shatter the spiritual frameworks on which doctrine rests. A faith built on divine uniqueness cannot easily absorb the notion of prehistoric nuclear wars or energy systems that defy modern physics. Others see a more pragmatic motive control. Knowledge is power, and the kind of power described in these accounts machines that run without fuel, energy that flows from crystalline resonance, or transcontinental navigation long before Columbus could unravel the geopolitical balance. The Church, once a temporal power as much as a spiritual one, might see preservation of this knowledge not as deception, but stewardship. In the wrong hands, such technology could cause devastation. In silence, it is safe. The book of Genesis tells of the Tower of Babel, a structure said to reach the heavens, built not just from stone but ambition. God, in this tale, confused the language of mankind to halt its rise. But some fringe historians and theologians believe this was not merely metaphor. They speak of the machines of Babel technologies that allowed communication across vast distances, manipulation of matter, and the artificial extension of life. In the writings of 16th century mystic Father Uriel Manzini, whose banned codex was retrieved from the Abbey of St. Gall, there are descriptions of the tongues of fire and ladders of lightning, once used by the descendants of Enoch. According to Manzini, remnants of these devices were discovered in the ruins of a mountain city in the Caucasus during a papal mission in 1491 and later transferred to Rome. A letter believed to be authored by Pope Sylvester II, dated roughly around the year 1000, also fuels the legend. Sylvester was accused in his lifetime of sorcery, but modern interpretations suggest he was simply ahead of his time. He allegedly possessed a device called the Brazen Head, which could answer questions posed in Latin. Some interpret this as symbolic of advanced computation. Others suggest it was a form of artificial intelligence, powered by principles long lost. The letter, translated in part by Jesuit linguists in the early 20th century, makes reference to knowledge gifted by watchers in flame before the breaking of the firmament. Whether poetic metaphor or literal truth, the implication is clear. The Vatican has long been in contact with ideas and perhaps entities beyond modern comprehension. The final thread in this dark tapestry lies in the connection between these technologies and lost civilizations Atlantis, Lemuria, or the shadowy cultures that predated dynastic Egypt. The Vatican's possession of early translations of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, encoded with references to ships beneath the earth and gates between suns, is often cited as evidence. In 1956, a classified Vatican report allegedly reviewed a set of stone discs recovered from beneath Lake Titicaca. These discs, impossible to date and etched with non-human geometries, were transferred to Rome under the guise of cultural preservation. Their contents have never been publicly disclosed. It is not merely the artifacts themselves that remain hidden, but their implications. If civilizations existed before the last ice age with technology surpassing our own, what happened to them? Did they destroy themselves? Were they destroyed by others? And does the Vatican know why? To some, these are nothing but stories, elaborate myths, born of imagination and mistrust. But to others, the consistency across time, geography, and testimony points to something far more troubling: that history is not as we have been taught. That our ancestors may not have been primitive apes inching toward the light, but the aftermath of something older, grander, and far more dangerous. If the Vatican vault truly houses the remnants of these lost worlds, then it is not merely a library. It is a time capsule, a warning, a gate between the known and the forgotten. History, when shaped by an institution with absolute moral authority, becomes more than record, it becomes a weapon. And in the case of the Catholic Church, particularly during the height of its political and spiritual dominance, history was not simply recorded. It was curated, filtered, silenced. Within the rumored depths of the Vatican Secret Archives lies a darker, quieter story, one not of doctrine and miracles, but of suppression, manipulation, and the erasure of human brilliance. Take Hypatia of Alexandria, a philosopher, astronomer, and mathematician of the 4th century. She embodied reason during a time of rising religious zealotry. Brutally murdered by a Christian mob, her story was sanitized, her writings lost, her memory reshaped to suit the Church's narrative. But some scholars believe transcripts of her teachings, even personal correspondence, exist in translated Greek within the Vatican's hidden collections, locked away because they praise rational inquiry over divine revelation. And what of Jan Hus, the Czech priest whose sermons called for reform a full century before Martin Luther's hammer struck Wittenberg's doors? The official story brands him a heretic burned at the stake, but letters from sympathetic bishops, possibly stored in the archive, suggest a different truth. That Hus was not a rebel, but a whistleblower. That his execution was not for heresy, but for daring to expose corruption in the sale of indulgences. A crime not against God, but against power. Then there's Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th century mystic, visionary, and composer. Today, she's recognized as a saint, but what's often ignored is how long her canonization was delayed. Why? Some believe it was due to the radical nature of her visions, which described divine feminine aspects of God and cosmologies that didn't align with male-dominated doctrine. Was Hildegard dangerous not because she was mad, but because she was right? Some scholars point to obscure Vatican marginalia, referencing visions that align uncannily with modern interpretations of quantum unity and celestial motion. The suggestion that Hildegard glimpsed a truth the Church wasn't ready to allow. There are saints in the canon whose entire lives may have been manufactured for political gain. Saint Christopher, once one of the most venerated figures in Catholicism, was removed from the official calendar in 1969 after doubts about his historical existence. But what's more telling is that early drafts of canonization documents suggest he may have been a repurposed figure from pagan mythology, his miracles echoing stories of Hercules. Yet somewhere, sealed behind codes and Latin incantations, may be the records of this transformation. A mythical figure turned martyr to help absorb pagan populations into the Christian fold. And then there are the stories erased entirely. Women who led spiritual movements gatherings, deemed too egalitarian, too charismatic, too uncontrollable. Gnostic communities where the divine feminine was not a metaphor, but a lived principle. Entire lineages of mystic practice, some say influenced by teachings brought back from the East that were condemned as witchcraft. The Inquisition's ledgers tell of trials, but the Vatican's secret logs may contain the confessions, treatises, and prayers of women who were once leaders before being branded as sorceresses and forgotten. One of the most haunting examples is that of Giordano Bruno. Official history claims he was executed for heretical cosmology, for saying the universe was infinite, that stars were suns, and that other worlds might harbor life. Yet rumors persist of letters between Bruno and unnamed Jesuit astronomers' letters, which suggest that some within the Church believed him, that they feared the theological implications of an infinite universe, not because it was blasphemous, but because it was true. In each case, the vault may hold the last surviving fragments of these lives, trial transcripts, uncensored letters, journals unsanitized by translation, documents that paint a picture not of perfect saints or villainous heretics, but of complex human beings caught in the gears of power, their thoughts, like burning stars, extinguished too soon. Why keep these records hidden? Some say it's to protect the faithful from doubt. Others suggest a deeper motive, that acknowledging the truth behind these stories would unravel centuries of manufactured authority. The Church's control over narrative, over who is remembered and why, would fracture. Sanctity would seem arbitrary. Martyrdom, political. Faith itself, a construct. And yet, one can't help but wonder if these censored lives were allowed to speak. What would they teach us? That sainthood is not the absence of flaw, but the courage to speak. That heresy is often a synonym for innovation. That the divine may not reside solely in obedience, but in truth, in rebellion, in the quiet brilliance of those condemned for thinking too far ahead. The vault remains locked, the keys metaphorical and literal, held by those who choose which voices echo into eternity, and which are buried under centuries of silence. But silence is never permanent. Eventually, the bones of truth rise. The censored lives call out not for vengeance, but for remembrance. Not for sainthood, but for accuracy. And perhaps, in that remembering, we begin to reclaim not just history, but ourselves. There is a reason some doors remain closed. For centuries, the Vatican Secret Archives, rebranded in recent years as the Apostolic Archives, have been sealed to the public, their contents guarded with the fervor of a kingdom hiding its crown jewels. But what if, tomorrow, the world awoke to a startling announcement? The vault was open? Not partially, not selectively, but fully. Every corridor of ancient parchment, every scroll, every sealed box, every forbidden text laid bare for humanity to see. What would happen? What would we find? And more disturbingly, how would we handle it? This is not merely a question of curiosity. It's a philosophical rupture, a thought experiment teetering on the edge of history, science, theology, and something deeper, our very understanding of reality. First, let us imagine the contents. Scholars estimate that the Vatican archives house over 53 miles of shelving, filled with centuries of accumulated records. This includes correspondence between popes and emperors, secret trials of heretics, lost gospels, occult manuscripts, and documents never catalogued in public-facing Vatican indices. Some whisper of texts far more obscure apocryphal books removed from the Bible, ritual manuals, and early theological debates that would make modern believers recoil. Among the most chilling possibilities are documents said to contain eyewitness accounts of miraculous, or unexplained phenomena events that defy both scientific and theological explanation. Think of it, first-hand letters from missionaries describing glowing entities emerging from temples in Mesoamerica. Transcripts from exorcisms so extreme, the rituals were banned outright. Early maps showing lands and symbols not found in any modern cartography. Reports of celestial apparitions, not of angels, but of star-shaped beings that arrived before Christ was born. If such documents exist, and if they were released, the religious framework of billions might fracture under the weight of too much truth. And then there are the names. Figures in history once branded heretics, witches, or madmen, whose exoneration lies quietly folded in these archives. The lives of mystics like Giordano Bruno or the visions of Joan of Arc may carry addendums written in invisible ink, retractions, private papal apologies, or worse, detailed instructions on how to bury the facts. Imagine the fallout if letters from the Inquisition revealed that some saints were political inventions, or that some heretics were not only innocent but right. The impact on geopolitics would be no less earth-shaking. Many believe the vault contains evidence of state secrets passed between church and nation diplomatic deals, wartime correspondences, and covert operations. If proof emerged that certain modern conflicts were encouraged or even orchestrated by ecclesiastical authorities, the outcry could dismantle centuries of alliance between the Vatican and global superpowers. If intelligence reports housed in the vault proved collusion in Nazi war crimes, colonial suppression, or Cold War surveillance, the result would be nothing short of institutional implosion. But let us go further. Suppose within the vault lie scientific artifacts, star charts not drawn by Galileo or Copernicus, but by unknown hands. Devices or mechanical blueprints taken from ancient temples in Tibet, Ethiopia, or the Andes technologies that defy current understanding, written in languages no living scholar can read. Theoretical physicists have long speculated that sacred geometry embedded in early Christian architecture may encode forgotten energy principles. If recovered documents revealed the Church had preserved anti-gravitational theories from Atlantis or even instructions for manipulating time, then the line between religion and science would dissolve completely. Consider the implications. Would governments immediately seize these findings under the banner of national security? Would corporations race to patent ancient devices as proprietary technologies? Would chaos erupt in markets, in universities, in temples? Could our civilization bear such a sudden evolutionary leap, or would it devour itself trying? And what of the vault's darker corners? For some researchers, the greatest fear is not what the Vatican has preserved, but what it has suppressed. Whispers of curses sealed in papal tombs, rites stolen from pagan temples and never meant to be spoken. Theories abound that within the deepest chambers of the vault are items deemed too dangerous, not because they're false, but because they're true. Manuscripts detailing pre-human civilizations, bones that don't match any known species, books of prophecy allegedly written long before their events came to pass, some say penned by prophets, others by non-human intelligences. If such things exist, would releasing them risk more than instability? Could it shatter the membrane that separates the known world from what lies beyond? That brings us to the psychological threshold. Human consciousness is delicate. Paradigm shifts rarely occur without trauma. When Copernicus dared to suggest the Earth revolved around the Sun, it took generations for the idea to settle. But a revelation from the vault might not offer humanity that luxury. If, for example, documents revealed that Jesus was one of many avatars sent by an ancient race to guide human evolution, how would the faithful respond? If scrolls chronicled extraterrestrial involvement in early biblical events, such as the burning bush, the parting of the Red Sea, or the Star of Bethlehem, could belief endure? The Vatican's justification for keeping the vault sealed has always been protection. Protection of the faithful, protection of the weak, protection of the sanctity of the past. But some argue that this protection is merely a euphemism for control. Control over history, over access, over revelation. Yet, in a world already drowning in misinformation, perhaps a sudden flood of buried truths would cause more harm than good. Still, others ask a more chilling question. What if the vault is not merely a passive archive, but an active seal? What if opening it risks unleashing not just knowledge, but something far older, far darker? In ancient texts, both Christian and pre-Christian, the notion of sacred containers appears again and again. From the Ark of the Covenant to Pandora's box, humanity has feared what happens when that which is hidden becomes known. Could the vault itself be a kind of ark? A container not of divine mercy, but of forbidden's memory? Then again, perhaps the true danger is not the vault at all, but us. What if the Vatican never needed to suppress this knowledge because it was too dangerous, but because we were not yet ready? The late Jesuit priest Malachi Martin once warned that the Church was safeguarding truths too great to speak before their time. He spoke in riddles of a third secret locked within Fatima, of entities not of this earth, of powers once summoned and barely contained. He died under mysterious circumstances. And finally, one last possibility. What if the vault is already open, but only to a chosen few? What if select world leaders, scientists, or secret orders have long accessed its contents, slowly seeding our collective consciousness with hints, films, novels, even conspiracy theories to prepare us? What if disclosure isn't an event, but a process, and we are already in it? What if you were never meant to know the whole truth? Or what if you always were? The vault is silent. Its guardians are still loyal. But the question hangs in the air like smoke from a long-forgotten ritual. If the vault opened tomorrow, would the world awaken or burn? And perhaps, just perhaps, that's why it remains closed, for now. Some truths aren't denied because they're false. They're denied because they're devastating. If the vault ever opens, it won't be history that changes. It will be us. And maybe that's why the door stays closed. Thank you for walking this path with us, across lost civilizations, sacred lies, and the edge of belief. This has been the Forbidden's Vatican Vault. You're watching Dust Files. And remember, some things are buried for a reason.